Hello! This perhaps isn't the usual kind of content you'd see on this channel, as I normally just upload cute little animation shorts and stuff done in Blender, and this channel is definitely still for that. However, the past few weeks I've gotten pretty deep into a side project that I ultimately decided I wanted to share with people, to show what I have done, and to share what I plan to do in the future for this little side project. So, what I have to show you today is a fairly early prototype version of Team Fortress 2 running in the Unity engine. This isn't necessarily a port, just about most of it was written from scratch so far, bar a few things. Now, I bet the first obvious question that most people watching that play TF2 is, why Unity? What's the point? To understand my reasoning for wanting to do this in the first place, allow me to explain. If you aren't particularly interested in the why, and are more interested in what this project is in the first place, skip to this timestamp on screen. For one, I really want to get better at using Unity. It's a skill that would be really valuable for me. Someone who is on the verge of being a professional 3D animator, being able to work proficiently in a game engine is going to be really valuable for me. Not just going to be, but valuable even today. I'm doing 3D animation for a small game development team that's working in Unity, and me getting better at using this software will help me get better at integrating my own animations in gameplay. 3D animation and video games are among my two favorite things to do, and not just playing video games, but learning more about games, like tinkering or modding games, getting good and competitive at games even, etc. And for the second reason, and this point is kind of carried from what I said before, Team Fortress 2 is my favorite game of all time. I started playing it in 2011, literally as the game went free to play. And I still put tens of hours into the game every week to this day, totaling around 6,200 hours of total game time. And in that time I also noticed some things about the game that I wish were different. For example, some things about the game just feel dated. Box collision holes, janky UI, tons of weird buggy quirks of the game revolving around some of its weapons and cosmetics, and other exploits that just makes the game worse. And if not that, just makes it more dated. A lot of this has to do with the game being 13 years old, but also a bit to do with Valve's neglectful nature of the game for the past half-decade. And some of that neglectfulness kind of comes from the game being dated. It goes full circle. The dated nature of this game scares many potential new players away. And even if Valve were still making meaningful updates for the game, it's doubtful that many of the issues with the game that makes it feel more dated will likely not get changed, since a lot of it will require a lot of fundamental reworks to the game and how it functions. Not only would that be a lot of work, but it can potentially make a lot of experienced players unhappy. And understandably so. You don't really want to go so far as to effectively replace the game with a new one by introducing a bunch of fundamental changes to the game. This also brings up another point. This whole project of mine is not intended to replace the original TF2 either. The base TF2 game is, and probably always will be, the more complete product. And people, including myself, will always want to go back to the original experience. But at the same time, I want to give my own take to TF2. And this is ultimately why I want to take this to Unity. To branch away from a source engine to something else. Sure, this could have been done in a different engine from Unity, like Unreal, or maybe even Source 2, but those engines are not really engines I want to be working with, and would rather go with Unity for all the reasons I've just gone over. Now that we've got the why out of the way, let me explain what this project intends to be. Again, this project is not intended to replace the original TF2, just coexist with it in the same vein as TF2 Classic. So to put the goal of this project into a few words, it would be like this. Make TF2 again, make it feel really close to the original, but get rid of the janky, unfun bugs, and playtest and get feedback for weapon and class balance changes, and make the game look visually better on top of all that. I can explain each part of that individually. It's exactly how it sounds. I want all what makes TF2 great to play to translate to this version as closely as possible. And a lot of that has to do with how the classes are designed gameplay-wise, fundamentally speaking. It also has to do with the original game's movement. The fundamentals of each class I want to remain the same, and I want you to be able to translate muscle memory for movement with each class from the original game to this version, and for it to just work. Crouch jumping, rocket and blast jumping, air strafing, ground movements, even things like C-tapping, you name it. Not to say I don't plan to playtest some tweaks to class and weapon balancing to hopefully make the game even better, but the basis of TF2 I do intend to carry over as close as possible. Some of that code that I mentioned before that was not made from scratch was indeed the code that comes from the source engine, and even down to the id Software Quake games, to handle the math behind air strafing and acceleration. And yes, I do want to bring in all the unlockable weapons from the original game too. This is where I go in to remove all the dumb things that have existed in the game for the longest time that just should be changed. Melee weapon hit registration? Scrap the original system. Make a new system that works better. And of course, no more teammates blocking melee swings. And to be honest, I'm not sure if I want to do this for all weapons, because even hit scan weapons get blocked by your teammates. though I don't know if I want to go that far. But I definitely want to remove that feature for melee weapons. Box collision holes? Scrap those and make them capsules. Capsule collisions will come with some different quirks when it comes to movement, but it's a change that I am willing to accept. And any potential map design tweaks in order to accommodate for that, I will do. Changing them to capsules will also complement the melee system rework, since round capsules will get rid of the inconsistent melee ranges that are inherent with a box collision hole, like in the original TF2. And also the many more bugs from the original that I will likely end up avoiding due to the writing of most of the code from scratch, and instead applying my own ideas on how to implement all kinds of aspects from the original game without inheriting the code from TF2 itself. Not to say the code written for this project won't have bugs of their own to deal with, but I will squash all the bugs that I can that's inherent to my own code. There will also be some quality of life improvements made to the user interface during gameplay. For example, instead of a standard voice line menu, there will be a communication wheel to give a generally easier and quicker access to the voice commands. A similar change will be applied to the engineer's build menus and Spy's disguise kit. This topic will always be pretty contentious, but I urge everyone who is interested in this topic to keep emotions in check and try to discuss this civilly and objectively. So, how I plan to approach making balance changes of any kind is to first identify a problem weapon or a fundamental problem with a class. These problems can be identified by myself or brought up by other people through feedback. When it comes to accepting feedback from other people, it is important to be careful what you listen to. As long as issues that are brought up stay objective, as in they state the issue and describe why it's an issue and why it should be changed, that isn't just because it feels bad or you get upset that this weapon kills you too much. Reasons like that aren't entirely valid in my eyes. Try not to view a weapon in your own personal bubble. Understand how the player base as a whole is affected by this identified problem. I will always be open to ideas to try out and playtest for changes, but it needs to be done right. And that even includes keeping myself in check. I need to communicate with everyone regarding what my thought process is, and try not to make my own decisions just based on my own reasons and justifications alone. Balancing things right will require that. I can't be alone in my thinking just to change the game to my ideal balance state. Just like how you shouldn't force changes to your ideal balance state, because the game doesn't revolve around you and you alone. Everyone that plays it is involved. This topic was pretty elaborate, but I hope I got my point across. It might be surprising to some how seriously I'm taking this aspect of the game, especially considering that it's fairly unknown how big this Unity TF2 project is actually going to get. I don't actually know, but these groundworks are in place in the event that it does get attention. This one is a fairly straightforward one. Original TF2 was built on the 2007 Source engine. Visually speaking, it shows. I want to overhaul some aspects of the visuals. Of course, I want to keep the general visual aesthetic from the original, like the toon shading and such with the custom light warps. Most of the visual improvements I had in mind are mostly technical. Mostly. Unity has pretty good dynamic lighting and shadow systems. Unlike TF2's fairly buggy lighting and especially shadow system. For example, have you ever found someone behind a wall because their shadow showed up on the opposite side of the wall? Yeah, screw that. That's not happening here. Shadows should, and will, cast on character models properly, instead of fading in and out of darkness arbitrarily if a part of the model loses line of sight with the sun or some other light source in the original TF2. And on top of that, Unity's baked lighting system can be more detailed than the original Source Engine's Hammer Editor light baking tools. Another aspect of the visuals I want to adjust is the character animation. This part is a bit more up my alley, naturally. First-person animations in the original TF2 are surprisingly bland for a game that's full of character personality. For example, walking only gives a very subtle back and forth and side-to-side sway of the view model, but is otherwise very static when on the move. And the first-person animations can sometimes feel like they have very low impact and weight behind the movements and firing animations. I want to address all of that. I want to give each class their own walking animations that's dependent on the direction they are moving, and quickly shifting your view will cause the view model to follow through a little bit. Jumping and landing will have their own animations. And all of these animations are additive. They will always stack on top of the primary action of the first-person model. Example of primary actions being the idle, firing, reloading, and drawing out the weapon. Though also do note that I do plan to still allow players to customize the view model field of view, and also provide minimal view model toggles to keep things in line with the original TF2. If you want to reduce the screen space the view model has to itself, those options will be there. Third-person animations will mostly remain the same, ripped straight from the original game. However, there will be some subtle improvements made here and there. The A matrices in the original TF2 is incredibly janky, and has tons of weird quirks about them. One of the most problematic quirks in my opinion is that, in the original, your third-person model has the limit to how far downwards they can aim their weapon. I intend to change that. The Heavy's minigun could be a challenge, but I'll definitely give it a shot when I get to him. Though I do wish I could port over some aim matrix animations from the original game, but I have no idea how to convert them into a usable animation that can be made into an additive animation. If anyone knows what to make of this aim matrix animation jankiness from TF2, or perhaps Source games in general, please let me know. Otherwise, I'll have to recreate all aim matrices for all classes for every combination of weapon and melee item in the game. And on a side note, I also plan to import the Source filmmaker models of the TF2 mercenaries. For the most part, visually, they look about the same, but the Source filmmaker hands are way higher in detail, and is worth bringing them in to improve the TF2 mercenary model fidelity. I will also add alternate animations depending on if there's a clip in the gun or not, like if the sniper's SMG was withdrawn mid-reload, for example, or if there's already a round in the chamber or not when you reload, etc. Reload timings may get affected though, but if I can get reload timings to stay in line with the original, then I'll do it. And on top of that, there's opportunity to give first-person animations even more character than what I already planned. I will also be changing the crosshair to be capable of providing feedback to the player regarding the state of your gun. For example, most hit-scan weapons shoot a perfectly accurate first shot, and the crosshair should properly convey this to the player instead of it being a hidden mechanic. Also, the mechanics of how the first shot accuracy works might get reworked a little bit compared to the original TF2, but I haven't added any hit-scan weapons that have this feature yet to the base game yet, so I haven't ultimately decided what I would do there. But the point is, I do want the crosshair to properly convey what randomness will be involved in your weapon spread whenever you shoot it. Not sure yet. It mostly depends on what Valve's stance is on that. I think the best way to tackle this is to import in all the cosmetics from TF2 to this Unity version. The players must have their Steam accounts linked so that the game can fetch what items the player has in their Steam TF2 inventory. Doing it this way will mean you have to still get items from the base TF2 game in order to use them in this version too. But even with this compromise, I have no idea how okay Valve will be with this idea. I'm not sure if there's any terms of service rules there that I could be violating. Not sure. At least regarding how TF2's cosmetic ecosystem works. I feel like having the system still purely depend on TF2's Steam inventory system would help make sure that doesn't interfere with that. But again, I'm not sure. I'll need to seek advice from someone that's more knowledgeable on this topic before I even move forward with that idea. Manpower. No, not the TF2 game mode. I'm talking about actual manpower. There's a fairly good chance I'll be alone on this project, so manpower is going to be pretty low with one person wearing a lot of hats. But if anyone is willing to contribute, please let me know. I especially may need some coding assistance. I don't consider myself a programmer really. I have some intuition with it, but my knowledge on C# is still fairly lacking. So if that's a hat I didn't have to fill in, I would really appreciate that. Though just keep in mind that any help that I accept will be on a volunteer basis, so if this is something you would prefer to get paid for, that's fine. You don't have to help. Just keep in mind I don't really have money to pay people to help, so that's the main reason why I think I'm probably going to be alone on this. Another struggle may be with Valve. Who knows? Maybe Valve won't be okay with this project. I don't know for sure, but considering TF2 Classic exists, I think I'll be fine. Will this project ever get done? Well, probably no. I don't think it will ever be fully complete. But I suppose a better question is, will it ever be playable for us to play in an online match? And to that, I don't know. It depends, for one, if I can figure out my way around Unity's way of handling multiplayer, and the odds of that succeeding will increase drastically if I'm not the only one working on this project. If I stay solo, I'll still do my best where I can. Unity has been surprisingly easy to use, and there's lots of online resources out there that I can use on topics such as this, and many others. Odds are, yes, I will probably eventually figure this out on my own, but things may move a lot faster if I can get direct help. So, that's about all I have to say. I'll have a video linked below showing me playing the early prototype, showing off what I've gotten done so far in the 2 weeks I've been working on it. I also plan to stream myself working on this project too on this YouTube channel. Though keep in mind I also still plan to stream myself working on my other main projects that's related to My Little Pony. There will be some overlap there, and the MLP 3D animation project is a long-term passion project of mine that I hope to get done this year. So you'll be seeing a lot of that alongside this. Perhaps that's something that may interest you, or perhaps not. If it doesn't, that's fine. I know these two topics don't always have a large overlapping audience. I might make a Discord server for this project eventually. It depends. Mainly, I refuse to moderate a Discord server like this by myself. So I will want to find people to help out the moderation there before I consider that fully. So yeah, anyway, thank you guys for watching this little video showcase. See you all later.